So I think it's absolutely fascinating to see how pizza has transformed over the years as it's immigrated from its homeland in Italy to different regions around the world, creating these new unique styles of pizza that are now iconic and very traditional in their own way. But through all of my pizza studies and all of my testing over the years, there's one main constant I've found, which is that if you prepare a good dough at the right hydration level with proper techniques, that dough can actually transform into 5 of the most popular styles of pizza that we have today. And this isn't an exact science. Nothing in pizza world should ever really be an exact science, in my opinion. Every pizza shop, every pizzaiola, of course, is gonna have their own recipes, their own hydration levels that they prefer. And there's some styles of pizza that won't work for this. For instance, Chicago deep dish pizza traditionally uses a higher fat dough to get that more pie-like texture, so that's not a great contender. But I've nailed down a dough and a hydration level that really hits that perfect middle ground, making it very all-purpose for things like thin crust, deep dish, nice and fluffy open crumb structures. It really can do it all. And it's a very simple recipe based off 1,000 grams of flour to make things very easy to calculate. I start with 900 grams of a good organic white bread flour. That's the bulk of this dough. And then just 100 grams of an organic whole wheat flour, mainly for additional flavor. Then all it needs is 5 grams of instant yeast, which is fairly low and will give us the ability for a longer fermentation. And then I'll add 15 grams of salt to the yeast and mix that into the flour. Now for this hydration level, which just means the percentage of water going into the dough, I have found that 65% is that middle ground that a lot of these different pizzas can work with. If you're more of a beginner pizza maker and you want an easier dough to work with, just lower to 60%. So since we're using 1,000 grams of flour, I need 650 grams of water to get me that 65% level. I'll turn my mixer on a low speed just until the dough comes together. Then I'll shut it off and let it rest for 5 minutes. And then after it rests, I'll give it another mix on a low speed for 5 more minutes. I'll transfer the dough to a board and give it a few stretch and folds, then get it in a container to bulk ferment until it doubles in size. This can be done in the refrigerator overnight for more flavor or at room temperature for just a few hours. And once the dough is doubled in size, I can form my dough balls. But each pizza style requires a different weight of dough ball, which I'll discuss for each pizza. So I'm gonna weigh out these different sizes, form them into balls, get them in my proofing bin, and throw that proofing bin in the fridge overnight for a nice long slow proofing. Now of course we have to start out with the foundation of pizza, which is the Neapolitan style from Naples. And flatbreads have been a staple in Italy for centuries, since they were simple, affordable food for the working class. But pizza as we know it now began to take shape in the 17th century when tomatoes arrived from South America and really transformed its flavor. Then in 1889, Queen Margherita was visiting Naples, and in her honor, pizzaiola Raphael Esposito created a pizza topped with basil, mozzarella, and tomato sauce representing the Italian flag. She loved the pizza, and the Margherita pizza was born, cementing its place in culinary history. So all of these dough balls have proofed in the fridge overnight. They're looking really nice. And for a classic Neapolitan pie, I'm using a 250 gram dough ball, which is pretty standard. And the key when rolling out a Neapolitan pie is to first focus on locking in that crust with your fingers. And once that crust is nice and locked in, you can work from the inside out, evenly stretching that dough to the perfect size. So I want to quickly talk about sauce, which I find is the biggest wild card when it comes to pizza making. It is the one ingredient on a pizza that I find has very little to do with the actual style of pizza and much more to do with the actual preference of the specific pizza shop or the pizzaiola, like the specific type of canned tomato product they have an allegiance to, whether they liked whole versus crushed tomatoes, or some places like to add spices or herbs to their tomato sauce. You do you when it comes to making pizza sauce. And for me, a no-brainer is of course using fresh canned tomatoes that I preserved last season. And at this point in early spring, this is just whatever I've left. So it's a mix of different types of tomatoes from the garden. And my preparation is fairly simple. I just saute a little bit of garlic in some olive oil. I add in all of those canned tomatoes and I use an immersion blender to get a nice smooth consistency. I'll season them with some salt and I'll cook them down on a very gentle low heat until I get my ideal perfect pizza sauce consistency. And this is the sauce I'll be using using for every single pizza today. So back to this Neapolitan, I'll spread on a light coating of sauce so I can still see some bare spots. I'll go in with a base of Parmesan, and of course I've got fresh mozzarella that I just cubed up, which gets sprinkled on, and finally some fresh basil leaves, which I'll hit with some olive oil so they don't burn in the pizza oven. And this pizza is gonna bake at the highest temperature you will see today. I try to hit around 700 to 750 degrees so you can get that immediate oven spring in the crust. And then I'll just watch how the top is cooking. If it's browning too quickly, I'll turn the flame down just a bit to create more of an even top-down cooking of the pie. Look at this thing.
That is one of my best Neapolitans ever, I have to say. While filming, which is not easy. The Vito Crunch, crunchy.
Listen to the crunch.
This to me is pizza art at its finest.
Nice light brown crust with some dark spots, which I like. Perfectly melted toppings with that crispy basil. Bottom looks great. All of my pizza skills coming together to make this thing work. Thank you, Vito. And let me show you what that 65% hydration will do for your life. That's exactly what it will do. I'm gonna be tasting a lot of pizza today, and it's gonna be hard to beat that bite. It's just so light. The flavor combinations with the basil and the fresh mozz. This is the godfather of pizza. There's a reason it all came from this. Next up, we have Detroit style pizza, which roots trace back to Sicily, known for its thick crust Sicilian pies. And in the 20th century, Sicilian immigrants came to Detroit to work in the booming auto industry. And a man named Buddy Rendezvous had a pizzeria, and he adapted his Sicilian wife's pizza recipe, but he baked his pies in blue steel pans from the actual auto factories, originally used to hold things like nuts and bolts, creating a very distinct style of pizza with a light, airy interior, but a super crispy caramelized edge. And I'm using this Detroit pan from Uni, and I've tested multiple sizes to really tune this pizza in, and I have found the perfect weight of dough is around 550 to 600 grams for this pizza pan. So first I just slightly shape the dough ball to give it a little head start before going into the pan, and then I'll just let it rest in the pan so the gluten can relax and I can work it to the edges. This generally takes around 2 to 3 rests in total until it reaches the edges of the pans easily. And now traditionally for Detroit pizza, the cheese comes before the sauce, and there's a specific cheese used called Wisconsin brick cheese, and I ordered a few blocks online, which I paid way too much for shipping, but I really wanted to get that traditional taste, and I have to say it tastes very similar to a low moisture mozzarella, maybe just a little fresher with a slightly punchier flavor. So you can sub this out for low moisture mozzarella, but I'm just shredding it up along with some cheddar cheese, which really helps get that nice lacy edge. And the key here is that you layer that cheese on the pizza and then stack a bit on the edges of the pan so it can melt down and crisp up. And I'm hitting my pie with a bunch of pepperoni, and this goes into a pizza oven right around 500 to 600 degrees and will cook for around 10 to 12 minutes. Again, once it puffs up, if the top is browning a little too fast, you can lower the temperature of the flame so it cooks a little bit more even. So while that's in the oven, it is the perfect time to talk about today's sponsor, which is Uni, the maker of these amazing pizza ovens. And what I love most about Uni is since their inception, they have just constantly innovated with the goal of making pizza more accessible, more fun, and more flexible for home cooks. And their latest innovation is this Coda 2 Pro, which uses G2 gas technology that has a tapered flame delivering incredible heat distribution. And from testing countless pizza ovens over the years, uneven cooking is one of the major pain points when it comes to making pizza at home. And this burner basically eliminates cold and hot spots, creating a super even cooking experience. They've also added this removable glass visor, which increases heat retention. And this oven has a massive 18-inch cooking stone with precision temperature control from 320 to 950 degrees Fahrenheit, which opens up so much flexibility in what you can actually make in this oven. And being able to just set this at the exact temperature, knowing that it's gonna heat up quickly and really hold that temperature well, makes outdoor cooking so much more accessible. I've got a very busy lifestyle with little kids running around, but this oven gives me the ability to continue to make pizzas every single week. So if you're interested in one of these pizza ovens, check out the link below in my description to head over to Uni's website. And I think we're ready to pull this pizza. I think she's done. My God. Now we take that warm sauce, we hit it with the racing stripes. Ooh. Do I have enough sauce? Oh no, I think I do. Just enough sauce. So a little hack to get the pizza out of this pan is you can use one of these flat edge bench scrapers like that. It actually works quite well. Or an official Detroit pan spatula. Does the same thing. But one of those is very essential. You gotta break that lacy cheese crust. And then she slips right out. Come on. Wow. Let's just investigate. Oh boy. Incredible fluffy interior, like a focaccia. And look at the exterior. That's what you want. Crispy, lacy goodness. That's where mega flavor exists. Usually you do not go crust first with the bite, but in this case, I've become quite obsessed with Detroit pizza over the last few months, and there is a very valid reason why it's gained a lot of popularity over the last decade. When you look at this pizza, you almost expect it to be heavy just because it's thicker, but it's light as a cloud. You get so much flavor in that crust. It's such a treat. And then I really do love the sauce on top. It's like you have a white pizza that you're just dipping in fresh tomato sauce, which is right up my alley. Next up, we have South Shore Bar Pizza. It's funny because there's a South Shore here on Long Island with a strong accent. So right when I say South Shore, I just want to come out with the South Shore Bar Pizza. But this specific pizza first appeared after World War II, being served late night at bars around the Brockton area and other industrial South Shore towns in Massachusetts. And it blends elements from all different types of pizza, but what really defines it is its small personal size, typically baked in 10-inch pans that often get passed down through generations. The toppings get pushed all the way to the edge, which delivers a nice caramelized edge, just like the Detroit style, but in this case, it is a thin crust, not an open fluffy crumb. Now my pan has not been passed down from generations. I ordered it on Amazon, but it's a 10-inch nonstick personal pizza pan to give me that traditional size. And I have found that a 200-gram dough ball is the perfect size to get that thin crust without having any issues of rippage of the dough. And just like Detroit pizza, I'm just gonna let this sit and rest until I can press it all the way into the edges. And the key is to push the center out nice and thin, and when you get to the edges, you can slightly push the dough up onto the sides of the pan, forming a nice little crust. I hit it with a layer of sauce, which again goes all the way out to the edges so that tomato sauce can actually caramelize on the pan. And the cheese is that distinct flavor profile from shredded low moisture mozzarella plus the additional of shredded cheddar cheese. And these pies are very customizable with ingredients. I mean, it's a late night bar food, so you can have a lot of fun with it. I'm just gonna keep it really simple with some sausage. And I like to bake it at 500 to 550 degrees Fahrenheit, which takes around 8 to 10 minutes total.
All right, I think that is perfect.
What I love about this pizza is if you let it sit for a few minutes, it actually releases right from the pan, and then you can just pop that. Look at that grease running off. I mean, that is just, you look at it and it screams bar pizza. That's exactly what this is. Nice browning on the bottom. This is a late night personal pizza. It's just so perfect for it. And even though I'm many miles south of the birthplace of this pizza, it reminds me a lot of childhood pizza that I grew up with. It's like a gourmet birthday party pizza. I don't know if anyone else relates, but oh my God. It's thin crust, but you still get a beautiful rise. And it's just ooey and gooey and greasy and perfect. Oh my God. And then you can't forget, like Detroit, you get that charred tomato sauce and that crispy cheese edge. Very important to this pizza. Next up, we have New York style pizza, which traces back, of course, to when Italians immigrated over to New York, which triggered a lot of changes in pizza. We have much larger pies for convenience. They could be reheated and served by the slice. They also, of course, swapped that fresh buffalo mozzarella for low moisture mozzarella, which was much more available. And instead of wood-fired ovens, they use bakery ovens that don't get quite as hot, which creates a much crispier and slightly drier crust. And for my New York style pizzas, I'm using a slightly bigger dough ball than the Neapolitan because it's a bigger pizza. So I'm going with 300 grams, which I roll out as big as my pizza peel can possibly fit, maintaining a nice outer crust with a pretty thin inner crust. I go on with a layer of tomato sauce, followed by a layer of fresh Parmesan, and of course that shredded low moisture mozzarella, and that's it. I tend to keep my New York pies fairly simple, just like you'd be getting at a slice shop in the city. And I bake them around 500 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a nice temperature where I can still get some spring in that crust, but I can also bake it long enough so it gets nice and crispy and that cheese really bakes in and those oils start to separate.
All right, look at that thing.
That's a beauty. So you can see it stretched a little bit as it released into the oven. I would have liked it more round than oval. My biggest critique on this is I needed a bigger peel. The oven can handle a bigger diameter, and I would have liked just a slightly thinner crust. New York pizza is generally bigger than this. I just didn't have the peel to support it. But you've got that classic grease layer from the cheese cooking a little bit longer in the oven. A little bit of cheese pull there, a nice airy crumb, and a pretty crispy bottom. Obviously the bottom gets crispier if you reheat it like they do in New York. You can hit it with basil, of course. Wow, definitely giving me New York vibes. And I've actually learned to really love making New York pizza at home because it is so good to just reheat. You throw that in the air fryer, it gets super crispy. It's the Parmesan with the low moisture mozzarella. It's a very distinctive New York flavor profile. I love it. Excellent. Excellent stuff. So for this last pizza, I am making something called lahmacun, which is actually not a pizza at all. But we are kind of going full circle here because if we look at the history books, pizza originally came from flatbreads topped with ingredients, which had been happening in Middle Eastern cuisine for thousands of years. And lahmacun translates into meat with dough. And it spread across the entire Ottoman Empire and then was eventually adapted to local ingredients in southeastern Turkey. But it wasn't actually until the 1970s that Turkish immigrants took the dish over to Germany and the Netherlands, where it was westernized and dubbed the Turkish pizza. And first we have to make this meat mixture, and there's a ton of different recipes you can use. I'm keeping mine fairly simple. I'm just gonna process up some red pepper, onion, garlic, fresh parsley, tomato paste. I've got a little Turkish spice mix here I'm gonna dump in, and some salt. And I'll blend that up until it's fairly fine. And then I'll throw in my ground lamb and give that a few more blends until everything comes together. And since this pizza is a very thin flatbread, I'm using the smallest dough ball of the day at 150 grams, and I'll be using a rolling pin to get it super thin. And I'm making sure to use plenty of flour so it doesn't actually get stuck to the board, because the meat mixture actually gets pressed out in an even layer right into the dough, almost so the dough and meat become one. And I like to cook these at a pretty high heat, around 600 to 650 degrees Fahrenheit, so you can get that really nice oven spring with some charring around the edges, and then that top flame is gonna broil the lamb, making it super crispy and juicy.
All right, that thing's done.
Smells amazing. And this is traditionally served with some onions, some fresh parsley, some lemon juice. I'm gonna hit it with just a little bit of salt. And we actually, believe it or not, roll it up. Slice it in half. It's like you got a little gyro sandwich, little kebab action. So I would say more of a flatbread than a pizza, but people do call it the Turkish pizza. Oh my God. It's nice to end on completely different flavor profiles. This is a pure culinary invention right here. The crust is so thin that when you wrap it up, it tastes like a classic gyro or kebab style wrap, but all of the ingredients get evenly distributed, including the crust, because of the wrapping. So every bite is perfect. It's not like bursting out with certain ingredients. That is unbelievable. One of my new favorite things. I'll be making that a lot. And there you go. This was not some TV magic trick. That is one dough that's 65% hydration divided into different size doughs to make an array of pizzas that all came together through unique techniques and additional unique ingredients.